following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back talking ball in the zone with four of the greatest baseball mavens that ever lived. Hal Bock is here.
Yes, I am.
George Case is here.
I'm here, too. Thank you.
Al Blumkin is here.
Hello there, everybody.
How you doing, Al? Recovering from your back injury.
No, it's still there.
Still there.
Yeah.
And David Hubler is here.
Hi,
David
good evening.
Going to lead the discussion tonight, but not before I have a moment on the air with Hal Bock to ask the question about the Mets, our Mets, Hal. Is this for real or what?
Well, they're like Jekyll and Hyde. They swept the Cleveland Indians, who are a competitive team, and we thought here in New York, oh, they're on their way now. And the Braves came to town and knocked them off 3 in a row. So they've split the first 6 games on the homestand, and they're playing the team that they're chasing for the wild card. They're playing the Cubs tonight. So we'll see how that comes out. They've got 3 games against the Cubs, and then they move on to, I think they're playing the Washington Nationals after that. So these are tough teams for them. These are not rollovers, and they
lost to the Braves. They played them well, and they're playing what I think is one of the 2 or 3 best teams in baseball. So,
well, I mean, they have their fate in their own hands. They can do it themselves, you know, and it's up to them to do it. So we'll see.
Who would have thunk earlier in the season we'd be talking this way about a contender?
You're right about that.
So, all right, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. David Hubler, and enjoy your evening, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you so much. I thought we would start the evening because I know we're going to talk a little football, but I thought I'd start with something that just happened recently in baseball, and that we're talking about the umpires. 2 interesting incidents occurred when the Mets' Kean Broxton was tossed for tossing his batting glove over his shoulder, and it hit the umpire, and he got tossed for that. And, I mean, he was upset that he struck out. He didn't think the pitch was a strike, but and he started throwing things around. Fortunately, it wasn't the bat that hit the umpire on the bat. But the other story is about Yanks pitcher Corey Geans, who's a rookie, and the umpire, Manny Gonzalez, told him that his pitching motion would be considered a balk if there was a runner on base. He did this toe tapping thing when you're not allowed to move off the rubber, and the next batter up, I believe, walked. And as soon as he started into his motion, umpire Gonzalez called it a balk, and the runner went down to second. So I was just thinking, these are such unusual incidents. And we don't talk too much about officiating in the leagues, especially MLB. And I was just thinking we ought to talk a little bit about the quality of officiating and the differences. One of the things I would start off by saying is that we all agree that baseball is unique as an American sport or as a world sport because of various reasons that we've all talked about in the past. But one of the things we never mentioned was the fact how unique officiating really is compared to the other 3 major sports because, for one thing, the umpires do not have to run up and down the field as football umpires do, football referees and umpires do, and the way the NHL refs skate up and down the ice. And the same thing is true in the NBA with the three officials now in each game, and they run up and down the court all the time. So, playing devil's advocate, I'd say that MLB umpires really have a cushy job, and I was wondering what you guys thought of that.
Well, they can't get fired. They're in a union, and you have umpires like Angel Hernandez and C.B. Buckner, who are constantly rated at the bottom, and they can't get rid of these guys. And it's a problem. And Angel Hernandez has the gall to be suing MLB because he's not a crew chief, even though the guy is constantly leading the majors and overturned calls. I mean, he's just a terrible, terrible umpire. And I think one of the big problems is they can't get, no matter how bad some of these guys are, they can't get rid of them.
You know, Alan, and you guys, I want to ask you something. We've had Al Clark on a couple times. You know, Al was former American League umpire. Now, my question, and Alan, you brought up about being a crew chief. Is the crew chief the same? In other words, they have 4 umpires that go around together and so forth. Is that umpire the crew chief of that collective group of 4, or does that change?
Well, I don't know if it changes. It used to be that the crew chief was there all year, but I think that's still in force. I'm not sure about that, but
yeah, I'm not sure either. That's why I asked you, because I think umpiring has always been a bone of contention with players and managers and fans and that kind of
Angel
thing.
Hernandez
Some umpires are really, well-respected, great umpires.
Angel Hernandez is bitching about not being a crew chief because he's been there for a long time, even though he's horrible and incompetent. Yeah. It's probably, there once the crew is set. I think the only time it probably changes is when the umpires go on vacation now and they bring up a replacement,
a replacement umpire, right?
Yeah, which is another bone of contention.
Well, they have to pick up somebody. I mean, he tossed Aaron Boone the other day, a rookie. Not even a rookie. He was
a minor league umpire. Yeah.
But another question is, I remember, and I'm sure you remember, Alan, and the time when you had American League umpires, you had National League umpires, and they were not interchangeable in any way, shape, or form. Was the umping better then in those days, or was it putting them all together under one roof? Are they better as a group today?
Well, I think that there was more familiarity with the umpires. A National League team did not see American League umpires, so there was a familiarity between the players and the umpires when they were in the same league. But somehow baseball, I don't know, they keep trying to reinvent the game, and they decided that they didn't need separate league officers, they didn't need separate league presidents, and they didn't need separate league umpires. So they homogenized the game. Mm-hmm. And now we have interleague play, and we have umpires who ordinarily would have worked in the American League, working National League games, and vice versa. I don't understand the point of that. I don't know what I was taught when I was a little kid. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I don't know why they thought that baseball was broken to the point where they had to rearrange all of these things. As far as the umpire's competence, when I was growing up, the umpires were major figures in the game. A lot of them were former players, and they were respected. Doug Harvey, they called Doug Harvey God because they felt he never made a mistake. Right. And there were other umpires, Lon Warnicki and Augie Donatelli and Al Barlick, and on and on and on I could go.
Bay Pinelli, guys like that.
Hal, you're absolutely right. Those names were very, very familiar. Maybe we're showing our age, but I can remember, reading box scores and looking at at the end of the box score, and they'd have the umpires. I mean, I almost knew I didn't know them personally, but I knew of their names, and they were the players.
Now they're mostly anonymous.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I don't know any of them, to tell you the truth. And when Al Clark, when we used to talk about it, everybody used to laugh and said, "Yeah, Al, you had your name on your hat," and they did. It said AL, and for American League umpires. Well, as you're mentioning, Hal, today they're all mixed, and they umpire both leagues. The balls are, just one ball. You have one commissioner, and the league presidents, they're no longer, they used to be on the American League ball, was the president of the American League. On the National League ball was the name of the president of the National League. Well, that's all gone by the wayside now.
Yeah, and they were made in two different countries, if I recall, too. They weren't all made by the same factory. But the thing that also, I think perhaps somewhere along the line, somebody got the idea, we'll take it slow, but we're going to integrate these two leagues and create one great league, and we'll start by doing away with the two presidents. And, it could have been something.
Why is that a good thing?
I don't know. I don't say it's a good thing.
It saves money. It saves money.
How so?
Well, how so?
It saves money because you only have one league, one office instead of separate league offices.
Oh, well, that
was the primary reason that the whole thing was done.
That's
chump change. Was to save money.
I don't think that's the reason.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Well, at worst, they could have shared an office.
I mean, that's ridiculous. Frankly,
I think so, too.
Frankly, that's ridiculous. Major League Baseball, and I covered Major League Baseball for 30 years, Major League Baseball had a suite of offices, and the American League office could be behind one door, and the National League office could be behind another door. That means nothing in terms of dollars and cents. There's no difference to the cost of the premises to Major League Baseball. I mean, it makes no sense.
They didn't do that way because I remember when I was a kid and you got those cards came out, and Will Harridge was president of the American League for like forever, and their offices were in Chicago. And when Warren Joggs was the president of the National League, the offices there were in Cincinnati.
You're talking about the Dark Ages, Alan.
I know that.
Modern baseball had a suite of offices. I was there. I went in those offices. They had a suite of offices. You want to talk to the president of the National League, Chub Feeney? His office is down the hall over there. You want to talk to the president of the American League, Joe Cronin? His office is on the other side of the room. It's a suite of offices.
Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah.
That has nothing whatsoever to do with it. I just think they like to tinkle with the game, and I think it's foolishness. I really do.
And they haven't stopped tinkering. That's the trouble. I'm sorry.
Let me ask you guys something else. I'm thinking about this from when my dad was playing, and you're talking you're talking dark ages. Obviously, this was dark ages, but back then there were often 3 umpires rather than 4.
That's right.
If you look at the old box scores back in even earlier into the 20s, I think sometimes there were only 2 umpires. So I'm really curious as to when the decision was made to go with 4 umpires, and then in the World Series and I think maybe the All-Star game they have 6 umpires because they have an umpire on each baseline as well in the outfield.
That's right.
That's to keep them from having to run. This is, I think it was. You remember a lot of those umpires were slightly overweight to be polite and kind, and I think they didn't want to have to run out to judge fly balls in the outfield.
You know what, David? That might be part of it. Also, if you guys remember, there were 2 different ways that the home plate umpires in the National League, I think they wore an inside chest protector. In the American League, they were an outside chest protector.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure today what they do. I guess they all have an inside chest. I don't remember
they're all inside.
Seeing one of those balloon umpires chest protectors in years. But I know when I first was playing myself, you always would see the home plate umpire. I mean, he'd come up and he always had it in his hand, and he'd have to put the straps around his body and all, and that's how they did it.
And it didn't help with their view of the balls and strikes area.
No, you're right about that. You're right about that.
Yep.
And the business
they couldn't get down. They couldn't get down as low or to the side to see the pitch come in. As with the inside chest protector, they had a lot more mobility than they did with the outside chest protector.
The business about having umpires on the foul lines, that's a reasonably recent. I mean, when I say recent, I'm talking about the 70s or the 80s and thereabouts, and it was put into play for the playoffs because they wanted the calls to be correct. They didn't want any chance of a first base umpire running down the right field line and blowing a call. They wanted a right field umpire to call the play in right field, the fair or foul. So, and I don't have any issue with that. That's fine, That makes a lot of sense. But, the other part of it is there's talk now of taking umpires really like the home plate umpire, automatic balls and strikes, having a robot call balls and strikes. And I hate that idea because
I do too, yeah.
Part of baseball is the human element. And having umpires call balls and strikes, their decision is what counts. My opinion is your pitch was a ball. Well, the pitcher is going to say, well, no, my pitch was a strike. Well, the umpire's opinion is the one that counts. So I don't want to have automatic machines dealing with my game. I want my game to be dealt with by human beings. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Hal, I don't disagree with you at all. I think that's always been part of baseball. And if you'll recall, I'm just telling a Ted Williams story. I don't know the umpire, but, he used to say, whoever the umpire was, he'd say, well, if Ted Williams didn't swing, it must have been a ball.
Yeah, you're
right.
I've
heard that. Yeah,
story.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard that in context with Rogers Hornsby. Supposedly some rookie was pitching, and he thought he had a strike, and the umpire said, if you throw a strike, Mr. Hornsby will let you know it.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah.
To me, that's part of the color and the fabric of baseball. Stories like that.
You can't get rid of the incompetence.
Well,
you can't get rid of the Buckners and the...
Let me tell you something. Mark
Angel
side of a barn, but he played shortstop for 20 years with the Baltimore Orioles. He was an incompetent hitter, but he was a pretty good fielder. So there's incompetence all over the place, Some of it is at Citi Field, where the Mets play.
Now, does anybody know? I have absolutely no idea. Do umpires sign just a one-year contract, or do they have multiple year? Do they have I know they have a union, but I mean, how is their income and how are their jobs protected?
I think the union negotiates.
The union negotiates?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they get different salaries based on years of experience, don't they?
Yeah.
I would think so, sure.
It used to be that any umpire years ago that took union, they would get rid of.
Well, they did that in a lot of industries.
Quite often, when I was growing up, that they had unions, umpires would start talking union, and they get rid of them. But then they had strikes. I remember there was one early championship series, when they started the playoffs, that I think it was the National League had substitute umpires because they were all on strike.
Well, in 1979, the umpires went on strike for 7 weeks, and they had replacement umpires, and they got guys from the minor leagues, they got guys from amateur leagues and so forth, and it was a holy disaster. It was a horrible situation. The games were out of control. Really, safe was out and out was safe. It was just bad.
Yeah, the NFL had that a couple of years ago.
Yes, that's right.
For a few weeks, and then it was so bad that they had to settle with them.
And that strike lasted. The baseball strike lasted 7 weeks.
Yeah.
Before they settled, but and they were in a lot of trouble. If they hadn't settled, you would have had a lot more belly aching and screaming about bad calls, because after 7 weeks, now you're talking about 2 months into the season, things are starting to get serious. It's one thing to be playing games in April and winning or losing, whatever. But when you get into June and July, you're starting to look at the standings and you're starting to say, wait a minute, I got to win these games. So, and the umpires' calls better be correct. I mean, the most egregious umpire's decision took a perfect game away from a Detroit. Was it a Detroit pitcher?
Yeah.
and they play at first base.
Yeah, they're right.
And the umpire was a very trusted, respected umpire who blew the call.
Yeah.
He just blew the call.
And he apologized, I believe, afterwards. But
yes,
he said, the integrity, he said, I can't change the decision. That was the decision I made. And, he owned up to it, but he said he made a mistake.
Yeah, he did. And to their credit, the players accepted it. They it's a mistake. It happened. It's unfortunate.
The biggest one in the World Series was Denkinger in the '85 World Series.
At first base, yeah.
Yeah, at first base made a call, and it was the Cardinals and Royals.
That's right.
They called a Royals batter safe when it looked like it was completely out, and the Cardinals were so unraveled that they wound up getting.
Org was the runner. I was there, I covered it.
Yeah, the Cardinals were so unraveled that they, because that was Game 6, they lost that, and then they got blown out in Game 7.
They got blown out.
Yeah.
So
and there was no replay available.
No.
Yeah. Which I don't like either. I don't like it either.
Well, I don't like the delays. I don't like the delays that are caused by replay. I mean, we've talked before. I mean, here you are, you're in the midst of a game. All of a sudden, there's a controversial call. They now have to call replay. The umpires have to huddle. They got to get the information from somewhere and up on high, and everybody's standing around. To me,
that the pace of the game.
Right. I've seen
basketball. Concerned that we now have automatic intentional walks that'll save at least 30 seconds.
Yeah, right. I've seen basketball games where they take 10 minutes to knock off 1/10 of a second from the clock.
Right. Your point about the balk move, though, David, I think that's a legitimate umpire's decision. There is a rule about the balk.
I wasn't questioning the decision. I wasn't questioning the decision. I was just wondering about the ethic of warning the pitcher in advance. I mean,
I think that's reasonable.
You do? Okay.
I don't have a problem with that.
Do you remember?
If you do that, that's a balk.
You remember 1963? At the start of that season, they decided to really enforce the balk rule, and especially in the National League. The umpire said, well, you want balks, we'll give you balks. And it got to the point where they're calling 5 or 6 of them a game.
Bob Davidson.
And they finally said, to hell with this. And they went back to what was accepted practice.
What about Bob Davidson?
Bob Davidson would call balks in every game, twice, 2-3 times a game. He was the king of the balk calls.
Yeah, the whole National League, I mean, a lot of the balk records in the National League was set during that the first couple of months of 1963 when they were doing that.
They come up with these ideas every so often,
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the greatest game in the world. It's the greatest game ever invented, but they can't find enough patience to leave it alone.
Hey, Hal, speaking of that, you just reminded me of something. What's with this Players Weekend nonsense? God, those uniforms were awful.
Oh, my God.
Wasn't that awful?
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
What genius came up with these all-white uniforms so that you can't read the logos, you can't read the nicknames, you can't read the numbers.
No, not at all.
Tremendous genius that is.
I think they started this last year.
What
the uniforms are now new. This was just here.
I know the uniforms are new. Yeah, this is ridiculous.
I mean, and then I guess
is that a marketing ploy? So now that they can MLB can now sell those uniforms.
Sure. Uniforms and the hats and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
I wouldn't think there was too much demand for those.
Well, the one thing that surprised me, I guess they were thinking for safety's sake, I don't know. But if you notice, the pitchers wore black hats, even if the uniform was white.
Yeah. Because the argument was that they could not see the ball coming out of the white hat.
Right, I know. But meanwhile, the whole uniform was white.
Yeah.
So ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were so god-awful ugly. Yeah, so ugly. In fact,
wouldn't that also be an advantage to the team wearing white? If you're talking about they can't pick up the ball, well, the team wearing black, the ball is very visible.
Sure.
I would think, yeah.
And I mean, I could see, I've seen where they sort of really go back to old time uniforms where the Pirates and the team, and have these sort of pie shaped hats and the old.
That's cool. That is
cool. That's fun for a day.
Over the weekend was so ridiculous.
Oh, what a way! In fact, I forget one of the managers was not complaining, but pointing out. He said they were awful. He couldn't stand them. And it might have been Aaron Boone. I'm not sure, but
the Yankees are playing the Dodgers, which are two iconic uniforms, and they don't play each other. They play each other in the regular season every third or fourth
5
year.
years, yeah.
So instead of having the NY and the Dodger blue, they had this junk.
Oh, it was awful. It was just...
Well, I've told you guys, I don't really follow the game the way I used to, but all I know is I turned on the Phillies game. I think they were playing, I don't know who they were playing, but one team instead, I assumed I was going to see him in red or whatever it is, and then I see him in black and white, and I thought to myself, I didn't even know this was going on. I said, what the hell does this mean? I've never seen such a thing.
I thought they were supposed to be softball uniforms,
Yeah, right, yeah. And whose decision was it to make it black and white? I mean, that was the worst decision of all.
Like a chess game.
Yeah,
like a chess game, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I didn't think of that, but you're right. Could have looked like a chess game. At least if they made it checkers, you'd have a nice red.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Okay. Hey, Hal, you wanted to talk about our friends in the NFL?
Well, yeah. The big news this week, I think, in all of sports, was the sudden retirement of Andrew Luck, the quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. And he's only 29 years old, but he's had a rash of injuries in his 7 years in the league, or 8 years in the league. In fact, he sat out a whole season when he had a ruptured kidney, I think, or
lacerated kidney, what they said.
Right, that's right, lacerated.
Yep.
And he had shoulder surgery that cost him a season. And last year he came back and was one of the best players in the league, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, led the Colts back into the playoffs. But he got hurt again. He hurt his calf and then his ankle. And I think he started to think to himself, what am I doing here, He's going to be a father for the first time. His wife is about to give birth. And he wants the opportunity to live a family life without having to limp around like some of these guys who play in the league for 10 and 15 years. Yeah. And so he decides to retire. And the word, because of social media and the wonderful social media that we have now, the word spread like wildfire in the stands in Indianapolis during the game. And when he walked off the field, the fans booed him. Wait a minute. First of all, he's got the right to make that decision for himself and for his family. These fans who were booing, it's almost like they demand that you give up your body for their entertainment.
Yeah, the booing came from all the fans who bet over in the number of games that they established lines on that. Like 9.5, so a team wins 10 games, they cover. If they win 9 games, they don't.
That's their problem.
I know it's their problem, but I used to gamble. I haven't done this in 35 years, but if you feel you're going to lose a bet because of something like that, you don't look at this rationally.
You don't boo a guy for a decision that he made for his own.
If it's costing you money, they do it. I mean, it's not.
Well,
it's not right.
Is it costing him money?
Does
he get the rest of his salary?
This is the mentality.
Does he get his full salary? He's signed for a few years, or does he just?
Well, they gave him a signing bonus of $25 million when he signed his first deal, and they're letting him keep that.
But
because all these teams are all flush in money.
No, they are. They're
rolling in it.
They're printing it.
Well, I know some from what I read, some of the former quarterbacks and present quarterbacks. I mean, they came to his defense and said, "Hey, you know, this is crazy." Yeah. I mean, he can make his own decisions. He made a decision. Andrew Luck's a very bright guy. I think he's got a degree from Stanford. I mean, he doesn't need to have his body beat up, and 10 years from now be a cripple like some of them are. Yeah. And I think in defense of him and any player who wants to retire in NFL football, I think that has got to be their decision. And they know how their bodies feel, and they know that they're getting beat up on the field constantly, both in practice and in games. And if they want to walk away, still have sound mind and body, then God bless him. Go do it.
Well, Barry Sanders, who quit, 25 years ago after 9 seasons with the Lions, and was still at the top of his game. He decided after 1 year, because the Lions they haven't won anything since 1957, so he decided that this was going to be it. And he just packed it in. The Lions had a receiver a couple of years ago named Calvin Johnson, who was nicknamed Megatron. Right. Packed it in after, and they also, when this whole thing broke the other day, they interviewed Wesley Walker, who was a Jet receiver for about 10 years, and Walker said he walks around in pain all the time. Because of the beating.
Jim Brown walked away at the top of his game.
Yeah.
Gale Sayers walked away at the top of his game. Why not? And if you don't walk away, you could wind up like Tony Dorsett, who's wandering around. He doesn't quite know where he is half the time. Or you could wind up like Earl Campbell, who was one of the great running backs of his era, who's now in a wheelchair.
Right.
Well, is that a quality of life that you want? No, you don't. So you make a decision like that. I give them all the credit in the world.
Yep.
At 30 in the NFL, you're really an old man. In Major League Baseball, 30, you're sort of really in your prime. But in the NFL, 30, you're on a downhill slope.
Oh, yeah. David, you're absolutely right. The longevity of a Major League Baseball player is much longer than an NFL football player. I mean, just to get an example, I mean, to qualify for the Hall of Fame, unless you have a special exemption, you have to be a 10-year player. Well, there are very, very few 10-year players in the NFL. Most of them are in that 5-year range because they get so beat up that they either walk away from the game or they're not effective anymore because they've had knees and shoulders and ankles and all kinds of stuff. They're a reconstruction constantly. And if I were a player, I'm not a football player, but if I were, I'd say, wait a minute, I don't want to do this anymore. I value my life and what's going to happen. And look, who was it? Lyle Alzado died a few years ago, and they autopsied his brain. I mean, his brain had severe damage from football.
Yeah, right.
During the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of top-notch football players that had very short careers because they weren't getting paid anything, especially until the AFL came in and made a market outside the NFL. And they after 5 or 6 years of banging their heads, they decided they could make more money on the outside than they could, getting their brains beaten in every week.
I have to ask you guys a question. Given what we've just said about the physical abuse that football players absorb on a weekly basis, do you think the game will ever change? And I mean, I was driving in my neighborhood today and I saw a sign: flag football, no contact. Sign up here.
They'll never sell that to people to pay admission to see that.
No, of course no, they won't. No. Because it's just one step away from professional wrestling. People want to see crashes. They want to see people pitting against each other and running at each other at high speed. I remember the first time they broadcast an NFL, when we were living in England, we broadcast an NFL game, first time, and the guys around me were all Brits, and the guys came out and said, well, wait, they're wearing all those uniforms. Look at they, they're all. And then they started the game, and then they saw, what? Look, they were all aghast.
They play rugby in England, and rugby is not exactly a non-contact sport.
No, but they don't wear they don't wear any real helmets and gears. And of course, in soccer, they wear the shin guards and stuff like that. But every Brit in the room was just totally astounded by the amount of hitting that was going on in an NFL game.
And I think and I'm not a football guy, but I think Seattle was using a technique they call it rugby tackling. And now it's starting to go into some of the colleges, I believe, where they're teaching the players not to lead with their head, but rather to somehow they put their head to the side. And I know my alma mater, Rutgers, I've seen them some preseason stuff, and they're wearing some kind of a gizmo that they put over top of the helmet, which is like padding. And this might be what they're starting to use because there has been such a severe problem with concussions and all this stuff in the NFL with concussion protocols and whatever they call it. But I think it is a severe problem. And Alan, I happen to probably agree with you with regard to I don't think fans are going to come out to watch flag football. Pay for it, but I think what's happened is that the fans, they get a bloodthirst and they want to see guys go down and get hit. Oh yeah. Unfortunately, football is a very violent game, and the fans are paying to see that violence.
Yeah, we've got another league coming up in the summer now. I understand another pro football league that'll probably last about a season or two.
Well, they're bringing the wrestling promoter. Vince McMahon is trying to resurrect the XFL.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm talking about. This league that they were. Yeah, they already got the cities.
Nobody went to those games. And the reason our illustrious president has it in for the NFL is they wouldn't let him in. They wouldn't let him.
He wouldn't let him buy it.
Force a way in when he had the team in the USFL, and then he tried to buy Buffalo Bills after the original owner died, and they wouldn't let him in either. I've seen correspondence that have been published between him and the other USFL owners, and he was not very popular, to say the least.
Anyway, I think flag football has a future. I do. Because I think otherwise you're going to just keep on consuming these athletes and leaving them as physical wrecks. And is this a way that we want football to be played and to be excited?
I could see it as a popular sport in some high school leagues and in junior colleges, where these are not guys that are aiming for the pros and just want to have a good competitive.
A fun day,
yeah.
But you're not going to get people to pay to see that.
High school football here in New York, there are fewer and fewer kids coming out because the parents won't allow it, and I don't blame them.
No, Hal, you know what? It's not just New York. It's here in Pennsylvania. I think it's all over the country. A lot of the kids are playing soccer now, or they're playing lacrosse. The parents are concerned with the concussion problem with young kids, and I think personally, I think there's probably going to be a lot of the youngsters that will play, flag football. It'll probably be some kind of modified rule. I know when we used to play it, I mean, we played it. It almost became like tackle because we would grab the flags and put everybody on the ground. Later on, they went to, I think, a single flag, so it was less violent. But I think that's probably going to happen at the lower levels of football.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it's going to happen at the pro or the top rung colleges. It's just too much money involved, too much of everything that goes on in college and NCAA and then the NFL. But I think some changes definitely are going to be made because it is a severe problem, no question.
Think about Alabama and Auburn playing flag football.
Yeah, right.
You're not going to get 5 people in the stands for that.
Well, that part of the country is the Southeast is the biggest, hottest football area in the country.
Right.
Especially with colleges.
Yeah, they don't basically have pro competition the way we do in other parts of the country. In the Southeast, right. Alabama and Auburn. I mean, some of those schools they're legendary. LSU and all those teams. And the fans are crazed. I mean, I've heard all kinds of crazy stories about the Auburn, Alabama.
Oh
game.
yeah.
I mean, unbelievable what goes on.
But that's basically it. The people in Alabama, the Alabama fans hate the Auburn fans, and vice versa.
Right.
Well, I don't think anything is going to be resolved in the next millennium, I might say, because there's too much money being made in that NFL, and they could play. They make so much money just from the TV rights that they could play some of these games in an airline hangar with nobody in the place, and they'd still come out making money.
Yeah.
I remember when I was growing up, I used to play two-hand touch.
Right. Yeah. That was a New York game.
Right. In the streets. In the street.
Yeah, in the streets. Exactly.
Yeah, the cars.
Well, the crazy guys in the neighborhood, there's usually one or two, they would dive, for the football and dive onto the cement, the concrete, whichever it is, to show how tough they were. I remember going into a schoolyard once when I was a little kid, and they were playing a game called Marion Motley. If you remember Marion Motley.
Yeah.
And so the idea was one guy would get the ball, and the other 3 or 4 guys that would tackle. He'd run toward them and try to get past them, and the other guys would tackle in their concrete.
David, Hal, and Alan, in my neighborhood, I mean, we played baseball and basketball, but we used to also play what we called center plunge. And you're talking about Marion Motley. We'd have 3 or 4 guys that would line up in the line, and then whoever had the ball, he would jump up, and they would tackle him in slow motion. So we used to play. We played this game by the hours. We'd say, "Yeah, come on, we're going to play slow motion football now," and that's what we did. So,
I feel like a namby-pamby with my two-hand touch.
Well, that's
you were civilized, Hal. We were just a bunch of rowdy kids.
You were in the suburbs. Don't forget, Hal. You were in the suburbs out there in Queens.
No, I was not. I was in the inner city.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize.
I grew up in the Bronx.
Oh, well, then you should have come to my neighborhood. We would have put you in a game right away.
Oh, sure. Well, this has been fun, guys. I enjoy every time we do this.
Right.
We'll do it again next Tuesday, I guess.
Okay.
Yep.
Take care, guys.
Okay.
Good topic, you guys. Talk to you all next week.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. You are hereby advised to keep your humor dry, your dreams wet, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting stations, and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening.